me come on and say hello, okay? All right. And say whichever language you want. Okay, yeah. صباح الخير بالغرب الأمريكي، مساء الخير بالشرق، وبالليل عندكم بفلسطين وبالعالم العربي. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for people in the West Coast, East Coast, and at night in the Arab world. We're just going to say good morning to everybody first, and then we will continue with the program. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Brooke next to say hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning. Good to be here. Grateful to be here with you all. And I'll pass it to Tamami.
Ohayo gozaimasu. 안녕하세요. Welcome to everyone. I'll pass it to Mary Jo.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm grateful to share space with you, and I will pass it over to Wendy.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Same. It's really wonderful to be with you. I will pass it to Jamila.
Marhaba, salam. It's Jamila Ghaddar. Very honored to be here. Thank you. And I'll pass that on to Shaista.
Thank you, Jamila. Assalamu alaikum. I'm joining from Toronto, and I'm very grateful to be here, but also, really sorry for the conditions under which we are doing this panel. I'll pass it on to Professor Humadar.
Assalamu alaikum. Tatya, Huanying, bienvenue. I'm honored and humbled to be here and grieving for the circumstances that are bringing us here.
We should pass it to Lynn and Mariam.
Yeah, and I pass it to Miriam.
Hello, marhaba. It's an honor to be with you today, and looking forward to the conversation. Humbled and honored.
Hello, everyone. I'm very also humbled and honored to be here. Lean from Teaching Palestine, and I'm looking forward to listening and learning.
Tala.
مساء الخير. Hello everyone. Thank you for
بعتذر بس
having
فصل
me.
النت هون.
مش مشكلة شروق.
سامعينك. سامعتينا شروق؟
اوكي شروق، عارفة عن حالك.
بس مرحبا وهيك شيء كلمة بالأول.
لا مش سامع.
شروق سمعتينا؟
They were people. Can people who are joining us please write in the comments where you're from, your name, your if you are where, which city, which state, which village, which community you're from, country, and anything that you want to tell us about your association, affiliation, school, community, whatever you'd like, so we can get to know each other. And if you would like to be on the mailing
سامعيني؟
سامعينك. I'm going to stop because one of our freed prisoners, Shuruk, is going to say hello now. So yeah, تفضلي شروق. بس مرحبا وعرفي عن حالك وبعدين بنكمل البرنامج.
تمام، بعتذر بس انفصل الانترنت هون.
بس احنا سامعين.
مش مشكلة.
تمام هيك سامعيني؟ بس أنا ما كنت سمعتكم قبل شوي فسألتوا إشي أو هيك؟
أنا بقول لك إذا بس بتعرفي عن حالك، اسمك ومن وين بتشاركينا، يعني
أوكي.
بأي بس
أوكي. أنا شهور كتبيات من القدس، عمري 26 سنة، تحررت قبل أسبوع ونص، قعدت بالسجن 8 سنين.
شكرا.
كان لسه طايلة 8 سنين.
شكرا كتير كتير. Shuruk says, I'm joining you from Jerusalem. I was freed a week ago. I am 26 years old, and I'm going to be sharing more as we go along. أهلا وسهلا. We are really honored to have you, Shuruk, with us. I'm going to pass it on now to my colleagues Huma Dar, Dr. Huma Dar, and Dr. Brooke Lorbar to do the land acknowledgement.
The campuses of San Francisco State University are located on the Turtle Island in San Francisco Bay Area, which is the occupied territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone, the Chochenyo Ohlone, the Karkan Ohlone, Bay Miwok, Plains Miwok, Delta Yokut, and the Nepean Patwin. I myself am from Indian occupied Kashmir.
And I'm here very close by the Confederated villages of Lishan, unceded Ohlone land. And on the East Coast, we have people joining here from the land of displaced and dispossessed Lenape people.
Thank you. We pass it on now to Dr. Jamila Ghaddar to offer a moment of silence and to give appreciations for everybody who made this possible. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask you all to join me here on the StreamYard, but also wherever you happen to be watching us live, for just a moment of silence for the many, many people, many martyrs, all those people who have been lost in Palestine, both today and recently, since October 7th, and since the Nakba and the Balfour Declaration, and people in the surrounding countries and all over the world over the last few centuries of Western imperialism, slavery, and colonialism. I just ask you to hold a moment for them in our thoughts today. Thank you, everybody. I'd also like to take a moment to express our thanks and appreciation for the many people who made this event possible, including Laith Ghulum and Miriam Karim and Deline Asari for their many work throughout the process, from the flyers and the publicity and the tech and the streaming live and all the many things that go into these kinds of events, but also for all their thoughts and ideas and intellectual work, as well as the whole organizing team at Teaching Palestine, including Dr. Salim Shihadi, and as well as the whole team at Feminists for Justice in For Palestine, for sticking through all the difficult months that seem nothing, of course, compared to the carnage in Gaza and what we're seeing across the West Bank and across Palestine. I also want to express special thanks to Dr. Rabab Abdelhadi for her leadership, for her incredible work connecting us with people in Palestine, and for her unfaltering courage, which is always an inspiration. Last but not least, a special thank you to the co-sponsors of this event, including the Right to Education campaign at Birzeit University, the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies at San Francisco State University, Teaching Palestine, Pedagogical Praxis and the Indivisibility of Justice, the Ad-Damir Prisoners Support and Human Rights Association, the Palestinian Feminist Collective, the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, the Tala Radio and TV in Khan Yunis, Gaza, Palestine, the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Winona College, Critical Resistance, the United States Palestinian Community Network, USPCN, as well. Thank you very much, and I'm going to hand that over to Tomomi.
Thank you, Jamila. So there are several classes from San Francisco State University who are joining here today. The first class is as Dr. Abdulhadi's Ahmed and WGS course, Gender and Modernity in Arab and Muslim Communities. Also students from two classes by Dr. Abdulhadi that were canceled by SFSU. And she's still teaching online through these open classrooms and other activities. So those are Palestine ethnic studies perspective, and also colonialism, imperialism, and resistance, third world movements then and now. And then my WGS courses, Women and Gender in U.S. History and Society. Students from two sections are joining here today. And I'd like, and then we'd like to read an excerpt from our statement that we wrote for the Feminists for Justice in and for Palestine Teach In today. So I'd like to start. In their unprecedented call on November 29, 2023, which is titled, quote, "An Unified Call for Justice and Freedom in Palestine, a call from Palestinian higher education institutions, do not be silent during Israel's unfolding genocide." 15 higher education institutions from occupied Palestine urge the international academic community to fulfill its intellectual and academic duty to seek the truth and hold perpetrators of genocide accountable. And then they demand that Israeli universities complicit in human rights violations should face international isolation.
Thank you, Timomi. They conclude the statement with a declaration for justice, and I quote, "In unity and with unwavering determination, we declare that justice will prevail. We will not be silenced. We will resist, remember, and record. The world must recognize Zionism for what it is, a genocidal settler project built on false mythology and sustained through perpetual violence against indigenous Palestinians." End of quote.
In response to this critical call, we and Feminists for Justice in for Palestine present Freed Palestinian Women Prisoners Speak Out. This event, which is the third open classroom in our series on Palestine is a feminist issue. We present it as a matter of abolition from the USA to all other occupied territories. Today, we offer a productive and engaging discussion about principled feminist, anti-colonial, and decolonial praxis and the indivisibility of justice, a praxis and a worldview that underlines the ways in which structures of oppression and our liberations are all intricately bound.
We honor the panelists from Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem, and the 48 areas in Palestine and the Palestinian diasporas who spoke at
لا
our
والله بس إشي
classroom on November 15th titled Gaza, Genocide and Resistance, Palestinian Feminist Voices, and welcome and honor the panelists for today's open discussion. We especially honor our leader and mentor, Dr. Rabab Abdelhadi, who conceptualized and organized the idea of the open classrooms on Gaza, as well as today's open classroom through endless labor, including communicating with her esteemed colleagues in Palestine.
In our first open classroom, we heard from Rima Eid, Andalib Odwan, Dana Faraj, Jehan Al-Hilu, and Hanin Zuabi. We also co-sponsored another open classroom with participants from Palestine, Dr. Haider Eid, Professor of Literature at Aqsa University in Gaza, and Professor Hanada Kharma, Professor of Philosophy and Steering Committee member of Right to Education campaign at Birzeit University. As we connect the themes of the open classrooms we initiated and co-organized, we also want to share the updates on our esteemed panelists in order to heed the call, to resist, to remember, to record. We must begin our open classroom by honoring the martyrs.
Mariam, please join us.
When Dr. Rabab Abdelhadi heard that the Udwan family was bombed, she checked on Ustaza Andalib Udwan, who was our speaker in the November 15th event from Gaza. We are heartbroken to share the news that Ustaza Andalib confirmed that she lost many members of her family, cousins of her mother, who are not far from her siblings' home in the camp. Jihan Hilu's husband is still missing. He doesn't have a body to bury. Ustaza Jihan Hilu is an organizer. We are inspired by the courageous and critical intervention by Haneen Zaabi, who was arrested and interrogated before she was released the day before our open classroom, who was also joined us at the November 15th open classroom. She was released the day before our open classroom from Israel's colonial detention prison in Nazareth.
Thank you. And Rima Eid opened her presentation with us, stating that she didn't want to speak about her research or anything on her work before the genocide ends, but she came only to speak about what is going on. Rima lives with her husband and her children in Ramallah, while her family are all from Gaza. For years, because of the siege of Gaza, she could not see them. And today, with the current war being waged against defenseless civilians in Gaza, Rima has lost 40 members of her family, most of them children. Rima shared her testimony with us in hope that their voice will reach us and we can change their bitter reality and stop this hideous war.
On November 21st, we received an audio message from Dr. Haider Eid, sent in lieu of his participation in case he were to be martyred before our teach-in titled, "Is This Fascism? Resisting New McCarthyism in the Age of Gaza Genocide?" As a result of Israeli carpet bombing of his neighborhood in Gaza City, Dr. Eid and his family became displaced. Seeking refuge once again when he no longer had access to the internet, Dr. Eid braved his mobile's battery and sent us the recording to fulfill his commitment as a panelist. He stated, quote, "It is time to stand up for basic human rights, for humanity. What more does the international community need to see than amputated and headless bodies of Gaza children in order to take a stand, in order to say enough is enough? Is it too much to ask for basic human rights? Is it too much to ask the West, the world, to stand up against Israel's policies of occupation, colonization, apartheid, and genocide now?" End quote. On December 2nd, Dr. Sufyan Taye, an outstanding Palestinian physicist and applied mathematician and president of the Islamic University in Gaza, was martyred along with his entire family. A draft of our full statement regarding this context and a call to other academics will be available in the coming days.
This is the basis why we came together. I just want to add a couple of things also. We are talking about prisoners, and one of our colleagues was in prison twice recently, Brooke Lorbar, who was part of civil disobedience, direct action, that was at the Grand Central Station in New York City and also in Auckland, where she, as member of Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, and the broader Jewish community that is anti-Zionist, that supports the liberation of Palestine, and that says no, not in our name, never again for anyone. So we are very happy to have you with us and to have courageous members of this collective who are always speaking up. And at some point, you'll be able to get to know us more. Today, we are listening to the voices of the people in Palestine, the people who are undergoing genocide as we speak. I'm personally very afraid to actually open the phone because I'm always worried about what bad news I'm going to hear next. The carnage continues. And there are so many people all over the world, millions of people all over the world demanding that it be stopped, that this massacre is ended. If it were not for the Israeli fascism and colonialism and violence And if it were not for the support, unconditional support, by the United States government and Western countries that continue to justify, cover up, and enable this massacre and just genocide of people to continue, our attempt here to offer open classrooms is a humble, modest attempt to bring together the voices from Palestine who are able to join us, to speak to everyone, to be able to amplify the message, what people are saying, and to hear from Palestinians themselves what they are experiencing and what they are going through. Today, it's our pleasure and privilege and honor to feature freed Palestinian women prisoners and one of the lawyers who braves every single day and goes to defend their freedom and the freedom of prison and demand end of incarceration for everybody. So we will begin first with Tala Nasser, who is a lawyer, and she is a human rights lawyer. She works at Damir Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association, which was a very, very important partner with us to make this happen today. She holds a master's degree in law from Birzeit University, with whom we partner all the time, and is a member of the Palestinian Bar Association. She is also a social and human rights activist and a member of Birzeit Municipal Council. Let's not ask you, when do you sleep? And how are you able to do what you are doing? Tala will begin by discussing with us the conditions of prison, the conditions of human rights, what is going on with Palestinian human rights organizations, what's going on in general, and lay the foundation for us to next we will be here from live testimonies, first-hand accounts from freed Palestinian prisoners from last week. So the floor is yours, Tala. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Rabab. Thank you, everyone, for having me or Ad-Damir in this important webinar. I just want to note something before we start. So Shuruq Dwayat, she's the released prisoner within this the past or previous prisoners exchange deal. She is supposed to be with us, but the internet is actually not working. And I have also to shed light on something that Shuruq was detained in 2015, which means before the coronavirus, before all these webinars and Zoom thing and all that. So she actually, till now, she doesn't know actually how to use all these technology because she was in prison. So that's why we can hear her sound. She unmutes herself actually. So this is important to note that is because she was in prison while we were outside learning all these technologies. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little briefing on the situation. First, after the 7th of October, the mass arrest campaigns taking place in addition to the situation inside prisons. Actually, since the beginning of the military operation launched by the Israeli occupation after the 7th of October, the total number of arrests has reached more than 3,640 detainees, including more than 150 female detainees, 41 journalists, 14 members of the Legislative Council, in addition to more than 200 children arrested and more than 100 university students. And also, from the beginning of the truce and in the past 7 days, more than 300 Palestinians were detained, which is actually more than the number of the released prisoners within the exchange deal. Currently, we're talking about over 7,800 Palestinian political prisoners are held inside Israeli prisons, including more than 3,000 Palestinians held under administrative detention without charge, without trial. After the release of some of the child prisoners, right now there is 166 children inside Israeli prisons, in addition to 33 women prisoners, including 11 prisoners who were arrested from inside Gaza. And that's what we learned from the released prisoners who were released within the exchange deal. We're also talking about 260 Palestinians from Gaza who are now held under the unlawful combatant law, which is actually similar to the administrative detention. It's without a charge, without a trial. It can be indefinite, and it's based on a secret file. Right now, we don't have accurate information about Gazans who were arrested from inside Gaza. We don't know any numbers. We don't know their situation and so on. They are actually missing right now. Regarding the situation in prison, so we have documented in the past months many of the extensive violations taking place inside Israeli prisons. And of course, Shuruk will talk actually better because she lived all these harsh conditions inside the prisons. But I will give a briefing on that. These violations include violent raids by the special forces using tear gas, and the brutal beating of prisoners, the indefinite blanket bans on family visits, the restrictions on lawyers' visits, they are prohibiting access to medical care, actually. They are cutting off electricity in several prisons. They are transferring number of prisoners to isolation. And one of the released prisoners, Marah Bakir, she was supposed to be with us, but we couldn't reach her, actually. She was isolated for more than 50 days in isolation in Al-Jalame, a prison, because she is the representative of the women prisoners in Ad-Damoun. So after the 7th of October, they raided the Damoun prison and they isolated Marah for more than 50 days. All these, of course, all the released prisoners actually and their testimonies confirm all these punitive measures that we documented that were enacted by the IPS, the Israeli Prison Services. And with less than a month, 6 Palestinian prisoners were killed inside Israeli prisons. 4 of them were actually arrested after the 7th of October. They are all young men. And until now, we don't know the circumstances for their death. The testimonies for the released prisoners affirm that they were brutally beaten and they were denied medical care. So they actually might be killed because of the torture and ill treatment that were imposed against or committed against the Palestinian prisoners. As Ad-Damir, until this day, we have documented 70 testimonies from the field for released prisoners and more than 30 testimonies from prisoners inside prisons, and they all confirm the same extensive violations. So that's actually what's happening right now inside prisons. The number of administrative detainees is actually unprecedented. It's like in the past 30 years, we haven't seen like this a huge number of people detained without a charge, without a trial. 80% of the Palestinians who were detained after the 7th of October were held under administrative detention. And of course, this all in attempts to silence Palestinians. It's actually the administrative detention is the easy policy or easy tool for the occupation to put the largest possible number of Palestinians inside Israeli prisons without presenting any charges against them. So that's actually the case. Shuruk will talk more about the situation in Al-Damoun prison, and maybe we can also answer questions or talk more after Shuruk talks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nasser, and thank you for this brief overview. We will come back and we have a lot of questions, but we would like to hear from Shuruk now. And if Shuruk is unable to join with the camera, we would love to hear your voice, and we will be taking turn in translating from Arabic to English. So please go ahead, Shuruk. It's our honor, and I'm going to say Shuruk Dwayat. She's 25 years old. She's a liberated prisoner from Jerusalem. She held the longest sentence among the female prisoners. She's a student at Bethlehem University at the time when she was seized on October 7, 2015. She was sentenced to 16 years in prison when she was only 19 years old. This is part of a trend of particularly elevated sentences that included against Maysoon Musa, Nurhan Awad, Isra Ja'abis, and many others. She was liberated as part of the second batch of freed prisoners on November 25th, 2013. And in the process, we will also continue talking about some of the histories of Palestinian women prisoners and connecting them with what's going on here. So please, Shuruk, we are so honored to have you. تفضلي يا شروق.
اوكي. سألتوني إجمالا عن الظروف اللي بنعاني منها كأسيرات، صحيح؟
بدك تحكي لنا اللي بدك اياه عن الظروف بالدامون، عن الظروف الاعتقال، ظروف المرأة، شو صار كمان من وقت أكتوبر للآن معاكم. خبرينا اللي بدك إياه.
طبعا أنا كان لي 9 سنين بالسجن، اعتقلت ب17 بال2015 وكان عندي إصابة.
هيك شوي تحكي جملة عشان بدهم يترجموا.
أوكي
تمام. بنعمل فقرة وبعدين بنترجمها وبعدين مشان ما يضلوا حبل أفكارك ماشي.
تمام. أنا اعتقلت ب17 بال2015 وتم إطلاق الرصاص علي ب3 رصاصات، وطبعا بعدها تم نقل للمستشفى. طبعا بعد طبعا مدة تم نقل للمستشفى، وبس قعدت في المستشفى 3 أيام مع إنه كانت الإصابة خطيرة، وبعدين تم نقل على سجن الشارون. طبعا كان في إهمال طبي كثير كبير من قبل إدارة المعتقل، وبعدها طبعا إنه كان دائما في تنكيل بحقنا كأسيرات، وكانت دائما في ظروف صعبة إحنا بنعاني منها، وما كان في احترام لخصوصيتنا كأسيرات.
I'm going to do this first part, Lean, then you can take the second part.
Okay.
So Shuruk says that she was arrested in October 2015, and she was shot 3 times. She had 3 bullets. She was shot by 3 bullets. She was taken to the hospital for her serious injuries, but only for 3 days. After 3 days, she was removed from the hospital and taken to Sharon prison. And she's talking about how much negligence, medical negligence she has experienced. And this is not something that is only exceptional to her. This is something that all Palestinian women prisoners, and also I would add children and male prisoners, face. And Palestinian women prisoners, particularly the cases she knows about and she's talking about, have also been brutalized and abused in prison. تفضلي شروق.
طبعا في ظروف كثير صعبة احنا عانينا منها خلال فترة السنين، بس أصعب الظروف كانت بالفترة الأخيرة، اللي هم كان يعني بعد أحداث 17 كان في كثير شغلات كانت صعبة. من ضمنها أول إشي سياسة العزل الجماعي، كنا معزولات داخل الغرف وما كنا نطلع على الساحة بالمرة، اللي هي كانت المتنفس الوحيد إلنا كأسيرات فلسطينيات. كنا بس نطلع لغرف الاستحمام الخارجية، وبعدين طول اليوم بنقضيه داخل الغرف. كانت تدخل علينا قوة كثير كبيرة. سحبوا من عنا كل الأجهزة الكهربائية، يعني التلفاز، الراديو، يعني انقطعنا عن العالم الخارجي تماما. خلال 50 يوم احنا ما عرفنا عن أهالينا ولا إشي، ولا أهالينا عرفوا عنا إشي. طبعا لهون منيح ولا أكمل؟
I can quickly translate. Okay, so she reiterated that the conditions were very harsh, and they were especially harsh after October 7. The prisoners were subjected to isolation. They were banned from going outdoors. Only to shower they were allowed to go outdoors, and all the electronics were confiscated. They didn't know anything about the outside world for 50 days. They didn't even see their family for 50 days.
كملي شروق.
وطبعا كان يعني تعرضنا لعدة قمعات خلال هاي الفترة. كان من خلالها كانوا يعني يرشونا بالغاز، يضربونا، سحبوا من عنا كل إشي بالغرف، بس خلونا الفرشة. وكمان تبع معنا سياسة اسمها تجويع التعطيش. إحنا بسبب إنه المي اللي بالسجن كثير فيها ترسبات، كنا دائما نشتري من حساباتنا الشخصية مي، فتم سحب كل هاي الشغلات، وصرنا نشرب من مية الغرف اللي هي أصلا مليانة ترسبات وصدى. وكمان بالنسبة للأكل، إحنا قبل 17 كنا إحنا نطبخ من خلال جهاز كهربائي اسمه البلاطة، بس تم سحبه وصار بس الاعتماد الكبير، يعني أو الاعتماد الأول بس على أكل السجن، اللي هو طبعا كان نوعية رديئة جدا، وكان ما يكفي. وكمان بسبب الفترة الأخيرة زادت عدد المعتقلات يعني الأسيرات بالسجن، وصار عددنا كثير أكبر من السجن، يعني من ما بيوسع السجن، يعني كان عددنا 30 قبل 17، والقسم بيوسع ل50 أسيرة، صار خلال الحرب 80 أسيرة، يعني عمليا الغرفة اللي بتسع 4 أسيرات صارت 19 أسيرات، فكان في اكتظاظ كثير كبير في الغرفة، ما كان يهمهم، كانوا بس يجيبوا بنات ويحطوهم عنا بالغرف.
Okay. Okay. And Shuruk is saying that we have actually experienced many forms of repression and punishment inside prison and abuse. They sprayed us with the tear gas, with tear gas مش غاز مسيل للدموع.
رش، كان رش مش رش غاز.
We were sprayed with gas. They took everything from us, everything, but they only allowed us the mattresses and the very thin mattresses that we have. Everything else was taken, confiscated. They also adopted a systemic policy of starvation, of starving the prisoners, and even water. They would not even allow us to have clean water. So we were only having access to water, the prison water that's already has in it sediments, and it's actually an unsanitized water. It's not purified water. We used to be able to buy from the prison canteen or with money to buy food. Now they stopped all of that, and then we were only allowed to eat from the prison food, which is very, very bad, and also very minimal quantities, and the quality is really bad. They also increased the number of prisoners. So in the same cell, so for example, in one part we would have 30 prisoners before October 7th. After and for an area that maybe fits 50. After October 7th, we had 80 prisoners, female prisoners in the same section. That makes it very, very difficult for us to be able to move around. It's very, very crowded. And Shuruk was beginning to speak about the younger children prisoners, but I asked her to stop so I can translate. So Shuruk, تفضلي، بدأت تحكي عن الأحداث الصبايا الصغار.
طبعا لأنه زاد عدد الأسيرات داخل الأسر، فكان طبعا في من فئات عمرية مختلفة، كان في طفلات، كمان كان في نساء اللي هم كبيرات بالسن وهم ما عملوا أصلا خصوصية بالمرة للأعمار، بالعكس كانوا يتعاملوا معنا كلياتنا بنفس الطريقة، وكانوا يعني يتعاملوا بكثير تنكيل يعني بحقنا. ففي الآونة الأخيرة كثير عانينا من شغلات اللي هي صعبة بالنسبة إلي، كانت عن ال8 سنين. والإشي اللي هلقيت طبعا هو أصعب إنه حتى لما إحنا روحنا، يعني ظل كمان في أسيرات اللي هم حاليا موجودات بالسجن، اللي أنا عن جد بتمنى لهم إنه الحرية القريبة. وفي من ضمنهم أسيرة اللي هي كانت يعني وما زالت إنها هي محكومة زي حكم اللي هي 16 سنة، وهم هلأ كمان بظروف كثير صعبة.
Leon?
Can I translate? Yes. Okay. So she was also mentioning that there were prisoners of different ages. There were children, there were elderly, they were not given any privacy, and there was no care for any of their conditions. All of them were treated with brutality. She reiterates how it was really difficult, and how she spent 8 years suffering. And even when she left, she still thinks about the women and the girls who are still abused in these prisons. She says one of them is 16 years old, and she still thinks about her.
She was sentenced 16. Yeah, تفضلي شروق، كملي.
وطبعا يعني إحنا خلال 50 يوم تقريبا كان في انقطاع كامل عن أهالينا، ما كنا نعرف عنهم ولا إيش، ولا هم كانوا يعرفوا عنا ولا أي إشي، فكان هاد جدا صعب. وكان في منع من لقاء المحامي، فما كانوا يخلونا نلاقي محامينا. وكمان كل الأسيرة كانت تعتقل خلال هاي فترة الأحداث، كان يتم ضربها. ومثال على ذلك إنه كانت في واحدة حامل بالشهر السابع، تم ضربها، وما عملوا كمان أي، خلينا نحكي أي يعني خصوصية إنه هي كمرأة حامل، بالعكس. فيعني الظروف كانت جدا صعبة بآخر فترة. ويعني بالختام بحكي إنه أنا بتمنى الحرية لكل شخص موجود خلف أسوار السجن.
And Shuruk says that it's also It's been very much more very difficult in the last 50 days because we were completely separated from our families. We did not have access to our families, even the visits. We were not allowed to see our lawyers. We were prevented from seeing our lawyers, and our lawyers were prevented from seeing us. Every prisoner was beaten up. For example, we had a prisoner who was 7 months pregnant. They did not care about about her physical condition. They also beat her up. It has gotten really bad. And as she said, one of the hardest thing that we experience is that we leave behind us many other prisoners in prison, and we're hoping that they will be able to have freedom like we had freedom ourselves. تفضلي يا شروق. خلصتي لها الكويت يعني بدك توقفي بعد؟
هسه تمام لهون انهيت.
ماشي اوكي. وين تالا؟
هيني.
اوكي. يمكن تالا بترجع، وكمان اذا كان بتقدر عبين ما تقدر مرح تيجي معنا. بدي احكي، بتقدري ممكن تحكي عنها هلا. يمكن نطول بالنا شوي لنحكي لتشوف اذا مرح بتقدر تيجي مشان هي بتحكي عن قضيتها. بس اذا ممكن انت تعلق. I'm sorry. بدي احكي بالانجليزي. I was just wondering that until Marah is able to join us, maybe Tala, you could explain, you could also comment from your perspective as a lawyer who is going to visit prisoners and the women prisoners and so on. And when we come back to ask maybe Shuruk to speak more about the Damoon in particular, women and so on. But if you can actually elaborate on that and talk about in general also the conditions, but also in this recent period, how did you work as a human rights lawyer? How were you able to function, or were you able to function?
Yes, I would start with one important thing is that the violations on the released prisoners and their families, and this is actually important to shed light on, because regarding the released prisoners from Jerusalem, they are actually facing many violations. And on the day of their release, the Israeli forces raided their homes. They actually prevented them from celebrating upon reuniting with their loved ones, their sons and daughters. The families of the released prisoners were summoned to Al-Maskoubiya Interrogation Center, where they were subjected to arbitrary conditions such as prohibiting gatherings. They were banned from marches and fireworks. They prevented chanting slogans. They also prevented the dissemination of sweets inside the houses. The Israeli forces also assaulted the journalists and expelled them and prohibited them from media coverage. And also the released prisoners, especially from Jerusalem, were threatened if they talked to the media, actually. And this is one reason we had a problem in coordinating with released prisoners, because they are actually threatened to be rearrested if they go out to the media and talk about their conditions and the hard conditions they were facing inside prisons. So this is important to shed light on, to put you in the whole context, actually. Regarding the Palestinian women prisoners, they are being held or incarcerated in Al Damoun prison. This prison is located in northern Palestine in the forests of Al Karmel in Haifa, and was established during the British Mandate. The women prisoners in Al Damoun suffer from unfair and prejudice policies implemented against them by the IPS. They are held in a prison that the walls of which filled with humidity, lacking the adequate and sanitary ventilation. They are forced to sleep on rusty beds that often cause back and bone pain and other health problems. The prison administration seeks on a daily basis to abuse and harass the women prisoners by raiding their cells routinely, and they sudden checks, actually, which often result in the confiscation of some of the women's belongings, mostly educational material or books that the administration can find inside the prison. Also, this prison is located in the occupied territories 1948. It's actually in a direct and explicit contravention of Article 76 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which states that the occupying power must detain residents of occupying territory in prisons inside the occupied territory. So Israelis actually transfer women prisoners into Israel. So no Palestinian lawyers or West Bank lawyers, they can't access the prisons inside Israel only if they get a permit to enter Israel. So this is important thing also. Another thing is that the year 2023 for Palestinian female prisoners began with the Israeli administration implementing punitive measures and violent prison raids, which is a measure, of course, of a collective punishment. And they actually, during our visit at January, like we're talking about the beginning of January 2023, the female prisoners reported that security guards and intelligence officers were raiding their cells inside the prison, and there is a daily cell inspection that the female prisoner guards previously carried out is currently being implemented by female prison guards accompanied by male prison guards. So this is also important. There is a ban from the entry of medical glasses under the pretext that they contain iron for some female prisoners that need these glasses. And like several violations have been taking place, especially in this year. And of course, just like I said, after the 7th of October and with all the isolation that's been taking place, the female prisoners can't talk to their families on the phone. They have no phones actually to speak with their families. It's only for they wait for the visit, and for now they are banned from these visitations. So they are actually isolated from the out world at this time.
Thank you تالا. شروق, do you want بدك تحكي تكملي تعليقات على ظروف الدامون أكثر وتجربتك أنت خلال قبل حتى ال50 يوم هدول اللي صاروا؟ Is Shuruk listening? Or was she cut off? Does anyone know?
Shuruk seems to have been cut off.
Okay. So I'm maybe while waiting for Marah, we will ask another question of Tala. Maybe Tala, you could also talk to, because there are some questions saying charged and so on, and you spoke about administrative detention, and I guess it might have been lost on some of our audience members. So I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more about administrative detention, renewal, where is the evidence, all of these issues, under what conditions this happened. Yeah.
Yes, so administrative detention is when a Palestinian is detained without presenting any charges against him, without a trial. The detention order, the administrative detention order, can be renewed indefinitely. It's based on a secret file. They say that it's for security reasons, that the detention of this prisoner or detainee is for security reasons, no charges presented. A judicial review session occurs before the military court in Ofar, and which is usually like nothing happens. There's no role for the lawyer at these courts because there are no charges. So the defense actually has to do nothing. And let me shed light on the military courts. Actually, the military courts, which Palestinians are being tried before, lack the guarantees of a fair trial. Of course, there's so much violations to the due process. It includes, but not limited to, the denying of Palestinians' right to know the nature and cause of the charges in cases of administrative detention, the right to an independent and impartial tribunal. So all the judges and prosecution are military judges and military prosecution. They are soldiers in Israeli army. The right to assistance of an interpreter. So the interpreter inside the court usually is on his phone playing games. So and of course, all the sessions are in Hebrew, and not all Palestinians know this language. So it's not the language they speak. And of course, the right to counsel and effective assistance of counsel. Not all Palestinian detainees can assist their lawyer because they can ban them. The military orders give the right to the interrogators to ban Palestinian detainees from meeting with their lawyer for up to 60 days. And of course, this means we can't document, we can't monitor the situation of the interrogation. So the torture and ill treatment taking place inside the interrogation centers, all the bruises all over the bodies of the detainees, we can't document these because of banning us from meeting with with the prisoners. So that's a thing. Another important thing is that everyone asks that all these released prisoners, like they are charged with, some of them with attempts to stab soldiers or settlers or so on. Others for throwing stones and Molotov cocktails and so on. But everyone has to look in the context of these of the military system and these military courts. We're talking about lack of the due process. We're talking about the confessions. The detainees are coerced to confess under torture and ill treatment, and they actually sign their confessions that are in Hebrew, and it's just like I said, it's a language that they don't understand. So where a confession has been signed, it's actually practically impossible to exclude it as an evidence, even where it is alleged to have been extracted under duress, including torture and ill treatment, just like I said. So that leads actually to defendants agreeing to plea bargain for offenses they did not actually commit. And in doing so, Palestinian detainees pled guilty and waived their right to continue with the judicial procedures, including all the hearing the witnesses and examining evidence and so on. So many factors actually lead Palestinian detainees to seek this plea bargain, because it includes the lack actually of faith and trust in Israeli military courts, the ability to provide a fair trial and a just sentence, and also to avoid the unfair prolonged military courts judicial procedure. So in circumstances actually where the time to the end of trial might often be longer than the sentence of detention of a plea bargain, and also to avoid repeated and distressing journeys back and forth from prison in Israel to the court sessions in the West Bank. So more than 90% of the cases filed before the Israeli military courts end in a plea bargain between the Israeli military prosecutor and the detainee because of all what I have said. So we have to look in this context before talking about charges and all that, because just like I said, they are extracting charges from detainees under torture and ill treatment without the lawyers being able to document and monitor and to do anything about all these violations and crimes committed against Palestinian detainees.
Thank you so much, Tala. I just wanted to actually take some time because I was going to do it before the speakers, but I was worried about us losing the connection. So there is some issues. Why we have been doing this whole work around prison and incarceration for a very long time. Actually, this particular rendition comes from 2013, when there was a solitary confinement hunger strike by prisoners at Pelican Bay prison in California. And one of the first solidarity messages that the prisoners in California received was from Khadr Adnan, who was a Palestinian prisoner who went on a hunger strike and who died while on a hunger strike, and Israel was not allowing his family to receive his body to bury him. And this also speaks to the notion that many people keep asking the Palestinians about nonviolent resistance, and here's a man who actually went on a hunger strike. There is nothing less violent than actually going on a hunger strike to protest administrative detention, where what Tala was saying has no charges, doesn't know what the evidence against them. It's all in secret and so on. So it is horrible conditions that are so unjust, even in the most unjust conditions. And so this is one of the things that Khadr Adnan sent a message, solidarity message to Pelican Bay. At the same time, in Guantanamo Bay, there the prisoners were on strike. So we came together, and I'm very happy that one of our partners who are here today, California Coalition for Women Prisoners, and the Critical Resistance, which two of the very main groups in prison abolition and many others came with us, and basically we co-organized a big teaching and a campaign called From Pelican to Palestine, P2P. And we had a teaching in which we included people who were on hunger strike, also spoke about the H block Armagh in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, where Bobby Sand and his comrades, and also women in the Armagh were also on hunger strike. We spoke about the history of abuse of prisoners, for example, in Puerto Rico, the torture to which prisoners are subjected, South Africa, many other places. So this is one thing. That the other thing I wanted to talk about is what Tala said about the tribunals, because when our collaboration led to the first ever U.S. Prisoner Solidarity Delegation to Palestine in 2016, in which we collaborated with California Coalition for Women Prisoners, Critical Resistance, Freedom Archives, and many other people. And we went to Palestine. It was 19 people, 4 freed prisoners from the US. And the work around that was to exchange with Palestinian prisoners, engage in reciprocal solidarities, critical discussions, and so on. And one of the things that has happened that actually Ad-Damir got us permission for is to attend the military tribunal for 3 young boys in Ofar prison, an Ofar military prison. And we went and attended the tribunal, and exactly we saw how the Israeli judge, by the way, military, knew they were there, because he turned to us and said, "Are you the American delegation?" And then he proceeded to give us propaganda material that in itself actually were not verified. There a lot of fabrications, and we know that from many legal groups, Palestinian and outside of Palestine as well. And we saw the young men being asked, then the translation was not right. They were not getting proper translation. The attorney general was saying things that actually didn't happen. They were being accused of things that didn't happen. Their lawyers weren't allowed to actually speak in it. So all the conditions were really, really terrible. That, I mean, I was translating for the delegation. At some point, I couldn't continue translating. We can talk more about that, but I also wanted to, one of the things that we also continued with the prisoner work, and I'm hoping that maybe members of the California Coalition for Women Prisoners and maybe Critical Resistance might actually also have questions, comments to ask, but after we hear about Marah's case. But we've been doing this a lot, and in addition to that, we issued a very strong statement and we went to all the prison. And I want to say to one of the people who said, "I'd rather be in an Israeli prison than a Palestinian prison," I would just say to that person that we don't want anybody to be in any prisons. We are for abolition. We are for freedom. We do not support incarceration. And if they are thinking about prisons and so on, that's their choice, but this is not where we're coming from. We believe in justice for all, so we're against that. Another person saying, "Why are you speaking in Arabic?" And it's very, very interesting, because one person saying, "Where is Palestine?" And I wanted to say, just go Google it or pick up a book if you would like, or attend a lot of these classes that are very teachable moments, and you can learn maybe things that you do not know. But why are we speaking in Palestine? Because we are speaking about Palestinian prisoners. That is the indigenous language of Palestine. People can speak in the language that they are comfortable with. If they are unable to speak in another language, majority of people in the United States actually do not speak any other language, aside from immigrants and aside from indigenous communities and communities of color. Majority don't actually speak. They have people speak English only. And so we are also against ignorance. We also for people learning more and so on. And also we want to challenge the domination of English as a colonial language that becomes the only medium for people to connect with each other. And we would like to be able to hear the exact words of our guests and honor them and respect them, in order not necessarily force them to speak in a language that maybe we are more comfortable using, but they can speak in their own language. And it is our responsibility to make it possible to deliver as best as we can their words to the people, to speak about that and defy the whole racist notion of English only that has been a process that's been trying to be the US tried to impose in Puerto Rico, tried to impose in many areas here on the US, and so on. So we're also against that because we are for justice for all. I'm going to go back to Tala and ask you maybe to speak about the case of Marah, because obviously Marah is not getting the connection, and we do not know if Shuruk is going to be able to come back her internet. So can you just tell us about Marah, and should you want to do it, or shall I read her bio and then you can talk more about her case? What would you like to do?
Yes, actually, I can talk briefly about her case because we like I'm not her lawyer actually, but the only thing I know is she was sentenced to 8.5 years. She was arrested when she was a minor under 18 in attempts of charges of attempting to stab a police officer, and she was the representative of women prisoners in Al Damoun. And she was released within the prisoners exchange deal in the past few days. So that's what I know actually only.
And we also know from some of the information that we heard, also the interviews with Marah and with her mother, that there were a lot of eyewitnesses standing there, and they said this is not true. What she was accused of actually didn't happen, and this is not something that is unusual for a colonial power that's constantly fabricates and concocts stories day in and day out. We know the story about Palestinians chopping the heads of children that even President Biden himself repeated, taking it from another liar, Netanyahu, who everybody knows is a habitual liar, but actually repeated it, and it has to do with the conditions of Islamophobia, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian, general racism of settler colonial regimes, and white supremacy and Zionism. And so people are not believed. Whatever you say, the only way that your account is verified is if somebody from the colonizing society comes in and says, this is right. So Palestinians say it's apartheid, apartheid, apartheid. People do not listen until a human rights organization, an Israeli human rights organization, does that. So this is something that's a pattern. It's not, but actually, Marah was going to school, and she was shot, and she was taken. And her mother says that she wasn't allowed. But I wanted to ask you, because when they were released, all the prisoners, the women and the children, prisoners, they were not allowed to have visitors. Visitors were kicked out of their homes and so on. Can you just shed a little bit more light about that? Why was this the case? What happened? Why were people who were trying to receive them in Bitunia to celebrate them shot at? Just tell us some of these conditions, please.
Yes, okay. So just like I said, regarding released prisoners from Jerusalem, they were preventing them from any signs of celebration actually upon their reuniting with their beloved ones. So they tried this. They kicked people out of their home. They kicked out the journalists. They threatened them that they cannot speak to the media. Regarding the Palestinians who were released at Ofar prison in the West Bank, of course, the Israeli forces firstly delayed the release of the prisoners until very late at night. They released the child prisoners wearing clothes that are too big for their size. Some of them were barefoot. The clothes did not provide adequate protection from the cold weather. Also, the forces actually used sound bombs, gas bombs, rubber bullets, live ammunition in front of our prison where families were gathered, waiting the release of their loved ones. So all these practices and violations only to prevent released prisoners from celebrating their freedom with their families. So yes, this happened not only in Jerusalem, but also in the West Bank against the families of the released or the supposed to be released prisoners.
Thank you so much, Tala. I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people who are trying to be distracting and diverting, and this is always I would say, a tactic by colonists, by oppressors, by racists, to constantly divert the conversation from the topic at hand and make it about them. And of course, it has to do with privilege and entitlement. And colonists who always think that they have the right and nobody else has the right to speak. So I think we should just continue focusing on productive work that we're doing and learning more about what's happening with the prisoners. What can we do? It was really heartbreaking to see Palestinian, especially in Jerusalem, that I know, like I saw Marah, people coming to say hello to her, to say welcome home and so on. They were kicked out. They were evacuated from the house. Journalists were evacuated from the house and so on. I think if you can speak a little bit, why Jerusalem? What is it about Jerusalem? Maybe the kind of the dual law that exists there, and can you speak about also the whole thing of the children, how Palestinian children are treated and how Israeli children are treated in courts as well?
Yes, so we're talking about a dual legal system. One is for the Palestinians from the West Bank, the other is for Israelis and Palestinians from Jerusalem, which is the civil law. So the military law applies on Palestinians from the West Bank, while the civil law applies on Palestinians from Jerusalem and the occupied territories 1948. So Palestinians from the West Bank are being tried before the military courts, while Palestinians from Jerusalem or the occupied 1948 are being tried before the civil courts. That doesn't mean that they have the same rights as the Israelis before these military courts. Of course, there's so much discrimination against Jerusalemites inside before these civil courts. This is one important thing. All the context of Jerusalem, all the just like you said, this whole settler colonialism regime is taking place, especially in Jerusalem. So yes, they are targeting Jerusalemites because of all this large or big context actually. One important thing also to shed light on is the disappointment of Palestinians of this whole international community, let's say, that especially the official international system, let's say the UN system, all these, because no one until this day could hold Israel accountable for all its crimes. And with all the genocide taking place in Gaza and all these massive arrest campaigns, torture, ill treatment, all of this, we are actually disappointed. We've been working for more than 30 years in submitting complaints, individual complaints, reports, submissions to all UN bodies, to all relevant UN bodies, but nothing happens actually. So right now, it's important to note that we think we rely on people of the world. We don't actually rely on solidarity groups, solidarity movements, and people of the world. We think that they can raise Palestinians' voice. So we are actually disappointed of all this UN system and all these complaints and all this, because nothing has been happening. Israel is not. No one could hold Israel accountable for its crimes. We tried upon all the years, in the past years, 75 years of all these crimes and so on, but nothing is happening. So right now, we have to concentrate actually on the people of the world, to raise the voice of Palestinians, to support Palestinians, to defend Palestinians who've been imposed to all these violations since 75 years old or more. So this is important. So when talking about international community, we're talking about people of the world who are actually demanding demanding the ceasefire in Gaza, demanding to stop all these violations, to release all political Palestinian prisoners, actually, and so on.
you, Tala. I was actually going to ask you about what are the people are always asking today for ceasefire. So I'm just wondering if you can maybe say something about that, and then we want to also, if somebody can, one of our colleagues look at the questions, if there are questions from the audience that we can bring them in. And we also said that we're going to prioritize questions from co-sponsoring organizations, and then we can go to the general public. We also would appreciate, I'm asking the whole audience, please give us suggestions. What would you like to hear more? What would you like to learn about more? Because we are organizing also series of open classrooms. We always do open classrooms for the next period, and we'll announce some of them coming up now, but also in the next semester, and we've been doing it all along. So just tell us just tell us about the whole, why is it that the whole world, why is it that Palestinians are insisted on a ceasefire and an immediate ceasefire and a
Yes,
continuous?
because yeah. So right now we have to stop this genocide. Like our first and the most important demand right now is stopping this genocide taking place in Gaza. All the massacres committed in Gaza, they should stop. All the international support represented in condemning these massacres and genocide actually does not rise to the level of the crimes committed. So at the meantime, the genocide should stop. There should be a ceasefire in Gaza right now. In addition to, because we think that the international community's failure to hold the occupying state accountable for its crimes means that Israel is enjoying a culture of impunity, and that this is what is actually happening. So we actually urge, let's say, people around the world, the international community, the supporters, to take immediate action with their countries to hold first Israel accountable, to ceasefire now actually, and then hold Israel, the occupying state, accountable for the genocide, for the war crimes, for the crimes against humanity that it has committed and it continues to commit in full view of the world. So this is the first demand actually.
Thank you, Tala. While we're gathering questions from our co-sponsors, from the audience, and also our colleagues here, we've been talking a lot about even the idea of putting this together has been very, very important. I just wanted to say that this is the whole question of prisoners support and prisoners release has been a very, very important part of our work. When we went to in last September, we commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Sabra and Shatila massacre, and Dr. Jamila Ghaddar was part of this. Dr. Mariam was also part of that, and we visited the Khiyam prison camp, which was a prison camp in the south of Lebanon, held by Israel, and where there is a lot of evidence, and there was a section for women. And so many people, and they made it into a museum. They opened it up, they liberated it, they made it into a museum. It's very similar to Robben Island, when Nelson Mandela was imprisoned, and to women's prison in Johannesburg, that are now museums, that you actually use that not in order to display artifacts where you're distant from them. You're actually really engaging and understanding and getting implicated in the history of what has happened. So Israel bombed Al-Khiyam because there was evidence of what Israel was doing, its torture. And we already also had a woman speak, Kifah Afifi, who was imprisoned in Al-Khiyam at our conference. And this is something ongoing. So this is, and we would like to do also more and more and more, because there is so much more stuff to shed light on. I wanted to now just basically see if there are any questions from our audience. And then see if my colleagues want to say something. I just wanted to announce good news in the midst of the bad news, that I've been insisting on teaching my classes online due to safety and disabilities, and I've just won that battle. So we will be having 3 classes next semester where we're going to be doing a lot of online courses. We're asking people, if you would like to sign up, please sign up. You can register for the courses formally, but you could also be part of the courses informally, learn, and so on, because we do not believe in that education should be charged, even though we live in this in this privatization word. So we would really like for all of you to. So there's one course on Palestine, one course on comparative border studies, Palestine and Mexico, and one course on Islamophobia. So obviously people are interested, and we would like to hear from all of you. So okay, so I'm going to turn it. Who's going to give the questions of the audience? Mariam or Lean? Any other questions?
Yes, they're in the private chat, Doctora. We've been pasting them for you.
Wow.
Yes.
Can you maybe say them, because I can rest my throat a little bit. Go ahead.
Of course. Maybe I'll start with the message from Diana Block. Hello, welcome, Diana. Thank you for being with us. Such an honor. As a member of the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, we would like to know how we can support Palestinian prisoners at this point. This beautiful question, recognizing that this is a difficult question to answer. That's the end of the question. Thank you for that, Diana. And I just, teared up reading it, but really also welcome everyone in the chats to give a shout out to our dear co-sponsors from the California Coalition for Women Prisoners. And I'll just turn it over back to people to answer that.
Yeah, but just to say that Diana also played a very important role in co-organizing the prisoners the prisoners delegation, and also Diana and another colleague, Anna Henry, put together a booklet in collaboration with Ad-Damir about Palestinian women prisoners, and continues to work day in and day out around the whole question of women prisoners, and everything is kind of very active, a big supporter, and also big heart and big intellect. So maybe you can answer that, Tala. What do you think? What do you think would work to support Palestinian women prisoners and prisoners in general?
Yes, so of course, continuing all the marches and the demonstrations, and specifically for Palestinian prisoners, because they are, of course, just like I said, the genocide taking place in Gaza is much more important now. We have to stop all the killing. But on the other hand, prisoners are being killed or murdered inside Israeli prisons. So people should talk about this, communicating or sending letters to your representatives, actually, to the members of the parliament in your countries, and so on. Everything which puts pressure on your representatives in your countries will actually help. All these demonstrations taking place everywhere, they actually put pressure. They raise Palestinian voice. So all of this is important. Talking about Palestinian prisoners, the situation they've been facing, all of this, this all can help actually Palestinian prisoners until they are all freed, hopefully.
Thank you, Tal. I wanted to ask you a question and then turn it back to the audience and our colleagues. There were a lot of conditions imposed on the prisoners who've been released. Like there was a prisoner exchange. There were no conditions imposed on the Israelis who were released, but there were conditions imposed on Palestinian prisoners who were freed. Can you speak a little bit maybe about that? Share some info if you're able to.
Actually, yes, we've seen all these, and I've mentioned all these preventions that have been taking place after their release. But one important thing is that the Israeli prisoners who were released were prevented from talking to the media, and of course, this is because they are afraid that the released prisoners will talk about the good conditions they were under. So, on the other hand, released Palestinian prisoners were released with their hands broken, with the tears all over, with the bruises all over their bodies, while Israeli released prisoners were not allowed and banned talking to the media. So this also shows like what the democratic Israel is trying to do, banning the released ones from talking to the media and telling what conditions. So yes, we've seen that, and we know that, and this is not new for us actually, to put these arbitrary conditions against Palestinians, and of course do nothing with Israelis.
I was wondering, is there any, there are questions. There was one question saying, can we give support directly to Palestinian women prisoners? And I mean, some of us have ideas about how can we, like, even send money from one place to the other because of all the very grave and dangerous new McCarthyist laws that the US is passing. But are there ways for us to give support? And what would you suggest, Tala? And then people are talking monetarily too, not just politically, because we talked about the political process. Yeah.
Yes. So actually, money-wise, I don't think Palestinian women prisoners need the money. Actually, they only need the support and all that. So, but if like we can manage to do this, but I think it needs a whole issue to do this, not only for security reasons, but also for it's actually sensitive for their families to get money from people around the world, because they are not detained to get the money. They are detained because they are political detainees who are resisting the occupation and so on. So I think it might be maybe supporting Palestinian organizations who defend Palestinian prisoners. There are many organizations in Palestine who defend Palestinian prisoners and support their rights. So this might help more and be better.
Okay, so just to amplify a little bit what Tala is saying, Tala is talking about the whole question of dignity, and people basically don't want charity. Palestinians need support based on the principal position that Palestinians are fighting for their right to self-determination, to return to freedom and liberation. And the Palestinian society has social solidarity among each other. And so they support each other pretty much pretty much they have the support of the community and so on. So what they really need is pressure in order to stop this wave, the unlimited amount of funding and military weapons from, let's say, especially from the US, that continues to give weapons, send experts and so on, to continue the genocide in Gaza and to repress Palestinians and put them in prison, and to pressure and expose Israel more. And I would just say that also I think it's part of imposing the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement. And until Israel actually abides by international law, as long as not violating, they should be held accountable. Everybody who violates things should be held accountable. I actually want to turn it over to my colleagues and see if you want to say things. And I'll just say on your own research, I was just thinking, for example, I don't know, Huma, if you want to talk about like the connection between Kashmiri and Palestinian prisoners. I was thinking maybe, Brooke, you want to say a little bit more about what is it that made you all do this civil disobedience. Every single person here, Tomo, and I'm using first names because you're all my sister siblings, and we've been working in it as a collective with each other. Everybody has something to say about whatever is related to this topic, to like the whole question of denialism as the major topic that Tomomi is working on, militarization. Wendy is working on the whole question of repressive of various communities and Islamophobia. And I'm not singling out. I'm just saying some of the questions maybe that Shaista. I was thinking maybe Jamila, you can speak a little bit about the whole question of the connection between indigenous and Palestine and the archival question. How do we use that? Mary Jo, I was thinking about the stuff that you've done yesterday. I mean, the resolution you passed, which is very much connected to our strike at San Francisco State. So I would, if everybody would like to just like maybe go around and just basically share and just say who wants to start, and then the next person can go. Take maybe 2 minutes so everybody can say something. And if you have questions also for Tala, please propose them. And I hope you're okay with that, Tala, right? Just take a little break.
Yes, I will.
All right. So who would like to go first? Go, Muhammad.
Yeah, I just wanted to say at this moment, anyone with a heart, we should all be Palestinians. So Palestine is in our heart, and that's major. and also as a Kashmiri. Dr. Abdul Hadi, you remember you were one of the first people to sign our statement. We have a group called Free Kashmiri Prisoners. And as Tala had pointed out, it's illegal to keep prisoners from occupied territories outside of their land. But India does the same thing. And we started that movement because there were so many of our prisoners, men and women and children, being kept in India and not in Indian occupied Kashmir. And there was a particular prisoner who was being kept naked for weeks on end, and his picture had gone viral. So we all fasted for 1 month for this freedom, and wrote a statement, and esteemed scholars and activists like Dr. Abdul Hadi signed, and we posted that. So this issue of prisoners is very, very personal. And my aunt and my family was exiled from Kashmir because my aunt was kept in prison for 3 weeks while she had a nursing baby for her political activism. So the quicker we abolish all prisons, the better we will all be. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dar. And of course, we are also struggling against Hindutva, Zionism, white supremacy, denialism, and that's it. Tomorrow, would you like to go next? Or you want to wait?
Yes, thank you so much for everything, and I'm honored to be here and humbled to be here, and like still thinking through what has been shared here. But I'd like to. I have been in a movement to support and stand with the survivors and victims of the what is called comfort women system, which is the World War II Japanese military sexual slavery system, and they have been. I mean, the Japanese government has not only they have been denying, not only like refuses to apologize or do any redress, take any redress measures. They have been denying the history of itself and harassing and attacking those survivors and victims. And they are now in their 90s, and many of them have passed away already. And so so when I hear about like Israeli denialism, Israeli like distorting the narratives and shutting down like Palestinian women prisoners and all Palestinians, like I also think about those whom we call grandmothers who have been shut up for all these years, and and also all other like colonized and the colonized and oppressed people by Japanese imperialism. Like I think about them, and so. And I'm hoping that I think there is a lot we can do to build solidarity between those movements. And so, so thank you so much for everything that you shared with us today.
Yeah, and I think
You're muted, Doctora.
this is we've done several classrooms on comfort women justice and denialism and so on. We will continue doing that, so people watch out for the older classes and also for the future ones. I thought that Dr. Lodwar, you want to go next? Go ahead. Tell us, what is this? What is this with all the Jews going on, descending and doing civil disobedience, when we hear again and again and again in all the media that the Jews support Israel, the Jews stand with Israel? Clarify that for people who are joining us, if you don't mind.
Sure, thank you. Well, I think anti-Zionist Jews have been organizing for a very long time, and there's always been Jewish anti-Zionism as long as there has been Zionism, right? So Zionism was not a popular movement among Jewish people when it began, and there's been different forms of Jewish resistance against Zionism, very varied, very different forms of Jewish resistance against Zionism over time. I think that currently, for many Jewish people in the United States, I can quote, I think my friend Morgan, one of the people who's been in leadership in Jewish Voice for Peace, once we realized that a genocide was underway. And it's not like this is something that we hadn't thought of before. In the Palestinian condition, the blockade of Gaza already was genocidal before this began. But as this became intensified, right, the technologies became intensified, those of us who have histories of massacre and genocide of Jewish people in our own family histories, in European Jewish history, we want to do everything that we can. And I want to always know historically that I did everything I could to stop this genocide, because I know that if I think of my own family, I would want people to do everything that they could, everything in their power while this was underway, not to look back on it and say that that was horrible when we understand it in the light of history, but actually to recognize it as it's happening now. We believe Palestinian people who have said that this is a genocide, it's the wholesale destruction of a society. Who more than European Jewish people know what this is about? And when we see that the Israeli bombardment of Gaza has not only been on people, on families, on children, and on infrastructure, but also on the very history of Palestinian people, on their literature, on their culture, on the documentation of their own existence. We know that that happened historically in the genocides that we have looked at, not only in our own legacies, but in other genocides that have happened across the world. We recognize that we are not the only people who have been subject to a genocide. And I think that understanding of solidarity is what leads to the slogan, never again means never again for anyone. Now, there are people who believe that never again means never shall the Jewish people come to harm again. And that is exactly what we're opposing. We believe that never again should apply to all genocidal conditions. And I think that, I just want to say, as an abolitionist, that and you've heard on this panel today, we are committed to solidarity. We are committed to understanding the way that prisons function as, right, an apparatus of rule across colonizing and genocidal regimes. And we look to actually the Palestinian people's resistance in the context of incarceration, and abolitionist feminists have long looked to the experience of Palestinian women under incarceration because of their great spirit of resistance and the organizing that prisoners have done. And we look to their struggle as an example. And we also understand that the Israeli prison system, the securities and surveillance and weapons and prison systems are exported around the world. And across the world, we see the same technologies of incarceration and policing and surveillance in use across the world. I want to say that Jewish people actually have our own legacies of incarceration and resistance, including armed resistance against genocide, that we also look to. And we don't want to be isolated in the world. We want to be connected with others in our struggle. And that is the perspective that I think that many Jewish activists are coming from now. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Brooke, Dr. Lorbar. I mean, there is something we're actually going to expand upon again and again. As we've done before, we will do more in the future. I think, Mariam, Dr. Karim, you had a question to ask, and then we will go to Dr. Patel. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Actually, Tala, if you don't mind, have a question for you. It was also came up a few times in the chat. If I may, if you don't mind speaking a little bit more about Adamir and the struggles that you face as a lawyer in working to advocate and represent Palestinian prisoners, and kind of what are the intricacies and the difficulties that you face in doing this work. You're on mute.
Sorry. Okay, so first let me speak briefly about Ad-Damir. Ad-Damir is a non-governmental association that works to support Palestinian political prisoners held in Israeli and Palestinian prisons. It was established in 1991 by a group of activists interested in human rights. Our center offers free legal aid to political prisoners, advocates their rights at the national and international level, and works to end torture and violations of prisoners' rights through monitoring, legal procedures, and solidarity campaigns. Regarding the, let's say, restrictions or difficulties we face during our work, and let's say especially after the 7th of October, because it's actually, we're having a lot of restrictions, and this all aims to prevent us from monitoring all the violations taking place against Palestinians. We're actually facing difficulty in visiting the prisons. So when the lawyer arrives at the prison gate, the alarm bell is rung and an emergency is claimed. So the lawyer actually goes home without visiting the prisoner after waiting for long hours, actually. Additionally, after we obtain an approval to visit a specific prisoner, they are transferred to another prison to obstruct our access to them. This is happening a lot at this time. We're also facing a problem in determining the locations of detainees after their arrest. So it can take more than 2 days to ascertain the detainees' whereabouts. We're also unable to gather information about Palestinian prisoners from the Gaza Strip. We are banned from accessing them due to their prevention from meeting with a lawyer. So these are the main obstacles and restrictions that we're facing right now. And all, just like I said, aims to prevent us and ban us from documenting all the torture taking place inside Israeli prisons and interrogation centers.
Weren't your offices several times, yours and the DCI and other human rights organization Al-Haq, they were raided several times, your computers were taken, you were banned?
Yes, so Ad-Damir is actually designated as a terrorist organization. Our offices were raided, our laptops were confiscated. They closed, actually, they sealed the door of our office to prevent us, of course, from continuing our work. But of course, we're here and we're continuing our work to support and defend Palestinian political prisoners until they are all freed.
Thank you, Tala. We go to Dr. Patel next.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Abdul Hadi. I honestly don't know what to say, following just these. It was an honor to listen to all of you, Tala, Shuruk, Dr. Abdul Hadi, all of you. Brooke, thank you so much. I just want to say, reiterate what Professor Dar also said, as a South Asian, as a Pakistani, who is Muslim, who is also a Dalit woman, I do want to say that, the ways in which we can show up for solidarity with Palestinians needs to be very ethical and extractive. So, for example, and I've learned this from Professor Humadar, who's often talked about how, Indians would show up for Palestine, and this is just for radicality points without showing up for Kashmir. And Kashmir and, India and Israel are both settler colonial states and very closely linked. So all I want to say is that, if your university is Zionist, your university is also Islamophobic, your university is also casteist and white supremacist. So, please educate yourselves about the work of caste, Islamophobia, and Zionism. I think we do need, and, of course, I've learned this from Professor Rabab Abdul Hadi about this maxim, this ethic and practice of indivisibility of justice. So I just want to say thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patel.
Sorry, you're muted, Dictora.
Tell us about the resolution. What happened yesterday at your university, where you're at?
Me? Hi, everyone. I'm still kind of processing a little bit of what we've heard. And I would just start out by saying, and following up from what Shaista just shared, that being in the space with fellow co-strugglers reminds me of all of the ways that our movements are always intersecting, both historically and currently. And one space that I inhabit is through the labor justice movement. And so I would encourage folks who have written in the chat and asked ways that they can show up in material solidarity to use their labor movements as a vehicle for action. And one of the ways that we did that locally is we've been working on a political education campaign for several years on the importance of boycott, divestments, and sanctions. A group of us organized to move forward to our local union a recognition of Palestinian campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel in order to ask for our labor union to use its power in order to repeal anti-BDS legislation here in Minnesota. And I'm proud to share that my fellow labor comrades recognize this importance locally as it moves forward to our statewide level. And I think that our labor movements need to be grounded in the movement for freedom for Palestine. And it's one way that I enter the conversation. Thank you. Thank you for everyone and the important contributions in this conversation today.
So I want to say, yeah, you're being very modest because the resolution you passed yesterday was amazing. And I'm also very encouraged by that because our own union, to which Dr. Lorbar and Dr. Kinekawa and I belong, is the California Faculty Association. We have yesterday, there is a strike now, roving strike. And yesterday at San Francisco State, Dr. Kinekawa and other of our colleagues were there with Palestinian flags, with kafiyas, speaking. We passed a resolution by the Palestine Arab Muslim Caucus condemning the genocide in Gaza and calling on our colleagues to work on it. And our executive board at San Francisco State chapter adopted it unanimously, the resolution. So people are actually showing up for each other. And there's a lot of developments in the labor movement, the postal union, UAW. There's a lot of things that are changing that we need to be connecting with each other, because as Dr. Patel said, that you cannot be talking about justice in one place. You can be talking about only justice in Palestine, not talk about caste, not talk about the lead justice, not talk about Kashmir, not talk about labor, conditions, gender and sexual justice. They're all connected with each other. And they are connected not because we just want to connect them, but because they do feed and reinforce each other. Okay, I'm going to turn next to Dr. Ghaddar.
Thank you, Doctora. I'm coming here to everybody from Lebanon. Thankfully, I was just able to touch land a few days ago. This is the resistant land. This is the liberated land in the south. I'm in the south of Lebanon. And I myself am from South Lebanon. One of the greatest honors of my life is that I'm often thought of as being or assumed to be Palestinian, which is probably more than I can carry. But because there is such a deep connection. That connection is, in terms of the struggle, in terms of having fought together, in terms of having been imprisoned together, in terms of having lived and danced and loved together. But it also goes back from before the colonial borders set in place by the British in the era of the Balfour Declaration. It goes back way before 1920, of course, then before 1948. So there's all sorts of other geographic imaginaries and understandings and relationships that so many of us remember and hold on to. And one example of that is, just being walking down my street and watching the children coming home from school today. I sent a picture to a number of you singing for Palestine, just as they were walking home, slinging their little lunch boxes. And so when we see that, we know for sure Palestine will be free. We know for sure that Kashmir will be free. And inshallah, we know for sure that the lands of the indigenous nations in Turtle Island will be free, and everyone. There is a world beyond empire, which is so much in Zionism, right? The other thing I'd like to share, of course, is that, I always talk about the liberation of our land. We were occupied for 22 years by the Zionists. It was also settler colonial. It was also many other things. We had our prisoners. Dr. Rabab mentioned that when she led organizing a delegation and conference in Beirut as part of memorializing Sabra and Shatila, where you had collaborator Lebanese fascist militias working with the with the Zionist state. So also there's that reality that I'm not trying to erase or deny, that complexity that I don't have time to go into in this moment. But as part of that, we went to Al-Khiyam prison. That was where over about 5,000 men and women, Palestinian and Lebanese, all political prisoners went through. I myself went there soon after the liberation of Lebanon in 2000 for the first time. The Zionists bombed it in 2006 during that war on Lebanon, but people still go. This one woman says, she doesn't know where her father's buried. That's where she goes to remember him. Another thing I would tell you about Al-Khiyam is that there was recently a martyr in Lebanon. They killed 2 civilians in their home through the Israelis. One of them was the mother and son. She had been a liberated prisoner from Al-Khiyam, Nasina Mizrahi, and she there's been quite a few martyrs here in Lebanon because of the fact that the fighting goes across the Lebanese-Palestinian border, usually always, fighting in Syria. Jordan has a history, Egypt has a history. The Zionist state has invaded and attacked all its neighbors. It has expansionist, settler, colonial aims that have always been concentrated on Palestine, that the Palestinian people have always paid the largest price for, but it goes well beyond that. And so we need to remember that context. Every time somebody starts spreading Zionist propaganda and lies about, just wanting a homeland, or, this is somehow biblical, or the Torah, or God promised something, we have to put the Israeli project in a regional imperialist context and also in a broader global context. And why then is the Israeli state supporting South African apartheid historically? Why is it then, dictatorships and military regimes all over the world? Because it is a fundamental part of the imperialist project globally, in the region, of course. I wanted to say all these things, but also, as is my habit, I repeat and I end with saying, we liberated our prisoners, we liberated the land. And I offer that always as possibility and imagined future liberations for others. They thought it was just as impossible. And of course, the circumstances for Palestine or Kashmir are different. The challenges, some of them much greater. But they also said it was impossible for us to do it. And we never listened, and we kept going. And I have no doubt, that we will all be dancing on a free land in Jerusalem soon.
Thank you, Jamila. Dr. Dar, you wanted to just say a couple of words before we give it to Tala?
Yes, I just wanted to add that at this point, more than 90% of the people on death row are Indian Muslims and Dalits. Even though our proportion, Indian Muslims are less than 14% and Dalits are 15% of the total Indian population. And, these are just the intersectionality points. Thank
you. They also parallel a lot of the numbers in the US as well.
Yes.
Of course, incarceration.
Exactly. Yeah. And if it's the upper caste, the dominant caste people, they have people who have proven record of mass raping a woman in 2002, Bilkis Bano. In 2002, under Modi, who's now the prime minister, there was a gang of men who had gang raped not just one woman, but had murdered 14 people of her family, including her 3-year-old baby daughter. They were released from prison on good behavior because of their upper caste belonging. So that is the casteist, Brahminical, Islamophobic system that we are dealing with.
Thank you. Tala, you get to say the last words, your concluding remarks.
Yes, so thank you for this important webinar. Actually, it would have been better, of course, if Marah was with us or Shuruk. But just like I said, the internet connection is not actually good here, and with all the threatening and all that, so we have to take this into account. Right now, I want to thank everyone, the people of the world who are raising the Palestinians' voice, who are going out and chanting for Palestinians' rights. And of course, we demand everyone to continue because the genocide is continuing. So everyone should continue to support Palestinians and to end all these crimes which are being committed by the Israeli occupation, to stop this genocide, to demand, to pressure your representatives to demand the release of all Palestinian political prisoners and stop all the violations they are facing inside Israeli prisons until they are freed. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tala, and really thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's a lot of pressure and very difficult, and you're making it sound really easy, though it is not. It's really rough. So we really appreciate that you're coming to join us and also all the work that you're doing. And I want to also thank everybody here. We've made it together as a collective. This is a labor of love. We come together, we lick our wounds, we mourn, we grieve, we cry, and we pick ourselves and we continue because we cannot be silent. We cannot be silent in the front of injustice, and we'll see it around the world. So thank you, and thank you definitely, Tala and Abdamir, for making this possible. And we are going to have more and more and more voices of freed prisoners and focusing on the question of incarceration and connecting with our comrades, communities, siblings, and other communities around the world. And also thanks all our co-sponsors and everybody who made this happen. I think we had over 500 people today, and more people will be watching because this is also, we use it as an educational tool for people to learn. So thank you all. Freedom will always prevail. Justice for all. Viva Palestina Libre. Free, free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.